Welcome back to the OU Insider YouTube channel. This is the Quick Slants schedule preview series for the Sooners 2023 season. I am Parker Thune. That is Jesse Crittenden. We've taken some time off from doing this series for a variety of reasons. Big 12 media days, wedding planning on my end. There's a lot happening. But as the season draws closer, we're doing our best to break down every single game of the 2023 season for Oklahoma individually. And today, Jesse, we come to a familiar opponent for one Dillon Gabriel, and that would be the UCF Knights getting their very first crack at Oklahoma as a member of the Big 12 Conference. This game will take place on October 21st in Norman, which is a long ways away. But on paper, how do you think these two teams stack up against one another?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup for a variety of reasons. I think both on the field and off the field. Obviously, the connections with Dillon Gabriel and Jeff Lebby to UCF, I think, are some interesting off the field storylines. But on the field, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think obviously UCF kind of rose to prominence in the late 2010s. I mean, they had that 13-0 season in 2017. I mean, since then, they've kind of been they've been solid, but not overwhelmingly good. I mean, they went 9-5 last season. I think last year in particularly, it was a pretty good offense and a solid defense. So I think for OU, I think this is going to be a pretty interesting home game. Kind of, I think a game that I think there's going to be some similarities into how both teams play. Obviously, Jeff Lebby previously coaching at UCF. I think both teams are going to be really up tempo offensively, so I think that's going to be a challenge for OU's defense. But UCF has a lot of returners, particularly on offense. They have a lot of returning players on offense, a lot of returning players on defense. I think this is a game OU should win, but I do think this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup.
Now, UCF's quarterback, their answer to Dillon Gabriel, as it were, is a guy that's been starting at the Power 5 level as long as Dillon Gabriel has, if you can believe that. Of course, Gabriel was starting for UCF as a true freshman in 2019. At the time, a fellow named John Rice Plumlee was starting as a true freshman for Ole Miss. Well, one thing leads to another, and much like Gabriel from UCF to Oklahoma, Plumlee ends up transferring from Ole Miss to UCF to become their heir apparent at the quarterback position, going on year 5 for him at the collegiate level, and very quietly one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the country, Jesse.
Yeah, no kidding. And if you look at his season last year, I mean, I thought he had a pretty solid season for them. I thought, I mean, the offense averaged almost 33 points per game. And I think he did a really good job of just being a solid quarterback. I mean, he threw almost for 2,600 yards, 63% completion rate, a pretty, a decent touchdown interception ratio. I think he did what they asked of him. I thought he was a pretty solid game manager that did a good job of getting the ball to their playmakers. So, I mean, I expect, I mean, it's not just him. I mean, they're returning RJ Harvey at running back. They're returning Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson at wide receiver. Both those guys had really good years last year. I expect this to be a competitive game, and I think mostly because, again, there's a lot that's going to happen between now and then. We're going to see how improved this OU defense really is, but I do expect this UCF offense will put up some points.
Gus Malzahn is a guy that I think his most notable achievement as a coach was turning around Auburn as quickly as he did, getting them to the national championship game, the final BCS national championship game back in 2013. Not that long. Was it his first year? I'm trying to recall, Jesse. I believe it was his first year at the program after Gene Chizik had, of course, ridden Cam Newton to a title in 2010, and then things had kind of crashed and burned from there. But Malzahn obviously aiming to do the same with UCF that he did with Auburn, and with UCF making the transition from the AAC to the Big 12, they're starting to see the boom on the recruiting trail. This is a program that has always had the resources to compete at the Power 5 level. Now they get the opportunity to do so. Do you feel better about this game? And maybe this is an obvious question, but you feel better about this game being that it's going to be played in Norman versus Oklahoma potentially going on the road to face UCF?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if OU was playing at UCF, I would absolutely have this game more circled as a potential trip up game for OU. Not because I think UCF has more talent or is better than OU, but that is a long that is a long drive or a long travel to get to UCF, and that's part of that. And so since it's the other way, since it's UCF coming to OU, I think that colors my perception a little bit. I think for UCF, I mean, this is going to be a year of first for them, right? They just haven't played in very many stadiums that are like OU's, that are as big, that are as rowdy. That's long. I mean, that's a long way to travel. OU's going to have the talent. So yeah, I mean, I think all that's going to go in OU's favor. But I think if it was the other way, I would certainly be looking at this as a kind of risky game for OU.
OU in the bounce house off a bye week right after the Red River rivalry series against Texas. Yeah, you got the potential for a little bit of a slip up there, but I think Sooner fans ought to feel a little bit more optimistic, knowing that this game is going to be played in Norman as opposed to Orlando. So at the very least, you get a bye to lick your wounds after whatever happens in the Cotton Bowl against Texas, and then you get to come back home and try to reestablish the tempo and the momentum of your season as you hit the home stretch. And this is the first game of the second half of the season for Oklahoma, number 7 on the schedule, so that bye comes right in the middle. As you look at how Oklahoma and UCF match up, who would you say is the key player in this game for the Sooners?
Yeah, I really think my main focus is going to be defensively. I don't think the OU offense is going to have much trouble putting up points against UCF. So I'm looking specifically at OU's defense. And since I think it's hard to pick a player on defense because of outside of Danny Stutzman or Woody Washington or Billy Bowman, I think a lot of those positions are up for grabs. So what I'm going to say, I'll cop out a little bit and say I think the defensive line as a whole. I think this is going to be a big defensive line game. I think they're going to really need to get pressure on John Rice Plumlee. I think that's going to be the key to disrupt this UCF offense. I think they play at a really fast pace. It's going to be on the defensive line to get some pressure in the backfield and disrupt that tempo a little bit.
I'll be honest, I'm looking at the second level here, and most specifically, I think Danny Stutzman and Jaron Kanik, presumably, you could probably loop Deshaun McColl into this conversation as well, but so often in the past, Oklahoma has been burned by dual threat quarterbacks like John Rice Plumlee because once he gets out of the pocket, they haven't had linebackers athletic enough to contain the scramble. I think most specifically of the game against Kansas State last year in Norman, where Adrian Martinez popped off that 50-plus yard run in the waning minutes of that football game because Deshaun White just wasn't fast enough to beat him to the edge, beat him to the sideline. So I think that this game is one of those where we're really going to find out what those linebackers are made of and if they're all that they're cracked up to be, both in terms of not only their ability to fit the run game, to drop back in pass protection, but their ability to contain an athletic quarterback, because that is an understated responsibility at the linebacker position. And there's going to be a lot of focus on that particular aspect of it with a guy like John Rice Plumlee. Who do you like to win this football game?
I've got Oklahoma, especially this early out. I mean, we'll see if maybe things change 6 or 7 weeks into the season. Maybe our perception of both teams changes. But OU at home has the talent advantage. I think UCF is in for a pretty big. This is going to be a pretty crazy year, I think, for them to join the Big 12. All that being said, I think this should be Oklahoma. I do expect UCF to put up some points. I don't know if it's going to be a rout, but this should be a game Oklahoma wins.
And I agree with you. I think, to me, I look at this as one of the easier games on Oklahoma's schedule, which naturally makes it all the more of a candidate to be a trap game down the line. If, say, you're 5-0, you get past Texas, you're through the first half of the season unscathed, and then you get a bye week, there's always the opportunity for complacency to set in. But on paper right now, I do like Oklahoma in this football game. The next matchup we'll preview promises to be an interesting one. Oklahoma making the trip up to Lawrence, Kansas to visit a reinvigorated Jayhawks football program, and a program with whom they struggled on their last trip to Lawrence back in 2021. Until we loop back around to that game, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please do so. Hit that button. You're never going to miss anything that comes your way on this channel. The OU Insider live stream every Wednesday, the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast. There is plenty of free content to be had all across this channel. But if you're just in it for the season preview, we've got another one coming soon. It will be that preview game number 8, the Kansas Jayhawks. Brent Venables versus Lance Leipold, round 2 after the Sooners prevailed 52-42 last year in Norman. We will see you on the other side to preview that game. For Jesse Crittenden, I am Parker Thune. Take care.